Our next speaker is the personification of inspiration. Ladies and gentlemen,
Sandy Costa.
Thank you. Sandy Costa.
When I speak today, I'm going to speak about the attributes that I believe cause leaders to practice humanity at work. But when I speak about this subject, remember, when I talk about leaders, I'm not just talking about people who lead others, I'm talking about leading ourselves. I've had the opportunity to work at companies that practiced humanity at work, and I've known companies that did not. And you can tell the difference. You can feel it in the workplace. When you looked at Elmer, you could see what pride he had in what he did. And there's an elegance to people that you speak to who really find the work experience to be meaningful. There really is a dignity to work, isn't there? If there's one thing we all understand, it's that people are complex. Now that may not be an epiphany to any of you, but it's true. And the greatest complexity we have is our emotional complexity. I keep this ring in my desk drawer to remind me to never speak to people while I'm angry. This is what happened. Before I became a lawyer, I was a pharmacist. I gave up the practice of pharmacy as a public health measure. The state of New York said that lives could be changed if I stopped working as a pharmacist. Well, one day when I'm working in the pharmacy, about 5 minutes before the store closes, these two guys run in the store, run behind the counter, guns in hand. One of them puts me up against the wall, puts a gun in my ear, and says, "If you move, I'll blow your brains out." To which I replied, "Who's moving?" Well, they finally emptied out the safe, and they emptied out the cash register. And just as they were about to leave, the guy that I was working with says to them, "Don't you want jewelry?" as he rips off his wedding ring. You can't make this stuff up. Well, you'll have to decide your own motives on why he did that. Well, at that, the guy who has the gun in my head sees it as my hands are up that I have on this college ring. He says, "Yeah, jewelry, give me that ring." I had had that ring for 2 days. I was upset. When he yelled a second time, I got mad. Well, I finally take off the ring, hand it to him, and say, "No one will believe you're a college graduate." My friends, never speak to people when you're angry. Don't hit that send button. When I was at Quintiles, we were growing very quickly. At some points during my tenure there, we were adding on 200 people a month worldwide. And you could always tell the people who were having problems with change. They were the ones who would talk about the good old days. "I remember when I knew the name of every person here." Well, they're the ones who would tell you, "I'll be happy if this happens, I'll be happy when that happens." And the ifs and the whens never come. When I'm 35, my hair starts falling out. So I get a call one day from my brother. I have an identical twin brother. My mother thinks he's a very handsome man. Some of you look like you don't believe I have an identical twin brother. I have an identical twin brother. Okay, let's take a vote. Who thinks I'm on the left side? I have no idea. My mother says I'm on the left, but she doesn't know. She dressed us identically until the 4th grade, and I'm convinced she did that so that if she called me Billy or Sandy, she thought she was right. When we got in the 4th grade and we dressed differently, I said to my brother, "Which name do you want? It doesn't matter." So Billy calls me up, and I hadn't seen him in about a year, and he says, "Is your hair falling out?" And there was fear in his voice. Now you have to understand it would take a lot to frighten my brother. My brother was a carrier pilot in the Navy. He says again, "Is your hair falling out?" So I knew I had to say something to comfort him, and so I responded, "Not one strand." When you have to talk to someone about change, what you need to do is not talk about how you're going to change. First, you have to explain to them why you're going to change. So when they come to you and say, "Why are we doing this?" you can tell them, to get to a better place. I have found that most people accept change in their personal lives better than they do in their business lives, and there's reasons. I genuinely believe that mistakes are overrated. If you're in an operational organization and people are not making mistakes, things are not getting done. I learned that in the business world, although I started practicing that long before that. The first time I introduced that concept is actually when I went to see my father-in-law-to-be to tell him I was going to marry his daughter. I hadn't known these people too well, and I didn't really realize how little they knew about me until my wife called and said she told her mother she was getting married, and her mother said, "To whom?" So the next day I go to see her father, and I have two things to tell him: that I want to marry his daughter, and that while he was on vacation I had wrecked one of his cars. The fact of the matter is that what often lies in mistakes are truths. And so let's not be too quick to criticize people and understand what was going on. We never treat other people the way we treat ourselves. If someone comes to you and tells you they made a mistake, as long as they haven't made the same mistake 3 or 4 times, what do we say? Glad you told me, it would have been a festering sore, now we can take care of it. But when we make a mistake, what do? We fillet ourselves. Your spouse, your children, your family, your patients. At the end of the day, it always comes back to relationships. It always comes back to people. It always comes back to helping people. The only once-in-a-lifetime opportunity we have is this day. When you get up tomorrow, remember that you are unique in all the universe. You are a being of incomparable worth. And if you do that, and you treat yourself and everyone else accordingly, I promise you on that day that your life will be a sea of reciprocal benedictions.